Rising for Justice fights for the rights of DC residents.
Rising for Justice inspires the next generation of social justice advocates.
We have not waned since the beginning of the pandemic. We're remote, we're meeting 2 times a week, and remain constant in updating one another on the existing legal challenges in our nation's legal system.
Rising for Justice serves people who have no place else to turn.
When my landlord would not back down, Rising for Justice was by my side.
Because of Rising for Justice, my criminal record was sealed, and a whole new world of opportunity has opened up for me.
As a native Washingtonian, I am proud of what we do here at Rising for Justice.
I'm proud to serve the people of DC with Rising for Justice.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host for this evening's Celebration of Service, Heather Pinkney.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Rising for Justice's 2021 Celebration of Service. I am honored to be a board member and to be able to share my love for an organization which has changed so many lives, from the underserved people of DC to law students, attorneys, and most certainly me. Now, I was born and raised in DC, and I went to law school at GW because I wanted to help people. And when Rising for Justice, way back then called DC Law Students in Court, gave me the chance to work with real clients in real courtrooms, helping them overcome real life challenges, I saw my future. Rising for Justice opened my eyes to what my career as an advocate could be, which led to more than 8 years as a public defender and currently my own practice. And through it all, I made sure to stay connected, teaching clinic classes and keeping an eye out on the program students when in court. Now tonight, we're going to hear many stories about how Rising for Justice has been the difference in people's lives. And we're going to celebrate some of the people who have made Rising for Justice the powerhouse that it has been for more than 50 years. Plus, we're going to raise some money, some essential funds to help deliver more free services to people who so desperately need it. All evening long, you may show your support by texting COS 2021 to 41444. You'll get an immediate link to donate, and our staff will be recognizing your donations in the chat. But we also want to hear from you. Using the chat, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you like, what your connection to Rising for Justice is. Where are my alums out there? Let us know that you're watching. We have a brief but powerful program lined up for you. And I know that by its conclusion, you'll have no doubt in your mind that this complicated world is a better place because of organizations like Rising for Justice. We're going to get things started with an update on what's been happening at Rising for Justice, including their response to the ongoing pandemic and the eviction moratorium. To bring us up to speed, please welcome my friend and the chair of Rising for Justice's board, Mr. Don Writings.
Good evening, everyone. The first time I walked into a courtroom as an advocate was as a student attorney with Rising for Justice, then called Law Students in Court. During that year, my fellow third-year law students and I counseled clients, investigated cases, argued motions, and tried cases to juries. Those experiences taught me how important this organization is to our community and how a single dedicated lawyer can alter the trajectory of a client's life. Now, more than 25 years later, it remains a privilege to continue to be a part of this incredible organization. I want to first thank our board of directors for their unwavering support of Rising for Justice through a period of substantial change for both our organization and the world. And I want to give an enormous thank you to the Rising for Justice staff for persevering through every challenge on behalf of our clients. I also want to thank the host committee, whose fundraising efforts helped raise critical support to make this night a success, and to the sponsors that they helped secure, including our Guardian of Justice sponsors, Discover and Kirkland & Ellis. You make our mission possible. Thank you. There's no doubt that 2020 was an incredibly difficult year for all of us, but the resolve of Rising for Justice to fight for equal access to justice in the District of Columbia has never been stronger. Our programs address the vast justice gap for those who would otherwise go unrepresented when confronting life-altering events. Let me give a few examples. Since the beginning of COVID-19, Rising for Justice, through our dedicated staff and clinic students, has served 1,600 low-income DC residents and their families. In 2020, we trained more than 60 law students and social work students who provided more than 16,000 hours of pro bono legal work. The work we do at Rising for Justice to provide critical legal services and educate the next generation of social justice advocates has never been greater. Over 30,000 adults in rental housing in DC report being behind in rent. As courts reopen, restrictions are lifted. We're getting ready for a surge of district residents in desperate need, including those who lost jobs during the pandemic and are confronting substantial risk. Rising for Justice will be there to fight for them. In addition, Rising for Justice attorneys remove barriers to employment and other opportunities through our expungement cases. We enforce due process principles in civil protection order matters, and we continue to give voice and expertise to those who have no other place to turn. The difference in so many lives has been and will continue to be Rising for Justice. And because of you, our supporters, we will continue to respond to changing and growing community needs and fight for justice in our community. Thank you so much for your generosity and for joining us this evening.
Thanks so much, Don. Now, in my years at Rising for Justice, I learned just how valuable real-world experience is to a young attorney. I learned what it takes to make a stranger trust you with their future, what it takes to make a judge come around to your point of view, and what it takes to stay calm and sane in the hectic environment of a place like DC Superior Court. Tonight, we're going to meet 3 people who have experienced Rising for Justice in different ways and whose lives have been changed for the better by those experiences.
My name is Jessica Mugler. I live in Washington, D.C., and I was a student attorney in the Rising for Justice Housing Clinic in fall 2020.
My name is Selena Aldape. I live here in Washington, D.C., and I'm an attorney at Rising for Justice.
My name is Leily Santos. I'm from Honduras, and I live in Washington, D.C.
I heard about Rising for Justice through my law school, George Washington Law School. It was one of the clinics that they offered, and I'm very passionate about housing law and tenant defense.
I went to Columbia for undergrad, I went to Yale for law school, and then I was lucky enough to get a fellowship here at Rising for Justice as my first job out of law school.
When I was like 14, 15, I started hearing these stories of coming to America and that you can be successful, go to school, and be able to help your family, do something better for your life.
My experience during Rising for Justice was really my first time being the lead and taking charge on cases. I was able to present evidence before the court. I was able to give an opening statement and cross-examine a landlord before court. I was able to work hand in hand with clients. And I was able to present testimony before the DC Council on a bill protecting renters. And without Rising for Justice, none of that would have happened.
If you are facing eviction, if you are living in an apartment where the landlord is refusing to make repairs, and if you can't afford an attorney, the court is not going to appoint an attorney for you.
I have 2 younger brothers. At that time, they were 16 and 17. I helped them come here. I have custody of my younger brothers.
When Leily came to the United States, she moved into her uncle's apartment in the District of Columbia. When he moved out, she took over paying the rent, and in that apartment, she built a life for herself and her 2 school-age brothers, whom she supported. Eventually, the building was sold to a new owner who wanted to kick out all the existing tenants in order to jack up the rent.
And they wouldn't accept any request that I put in for any maintenance. I met David, and then I was introduced to Rising for Justice, and I was so grateful to have a program that was available for people like me.
She was living in deplorable conditions. Her oven didn't work, her shower didn't work, her bathroom had no door, and she was dealing with a bedbug infestation so severe you could actually see bedbugs walking around in broad daylight. When she complained to her landlord, not only did they refuse to fix the problem, but they stopped accepting her rent and told her that she would have to leave.
I was paying rent and I had all the receipts, and so I had proof that they didn't accept my payments.
Leily told me that after 15 years in this country, she was ready to fight for her rights. So when we weren't able to work things out with her landlord, my colleague Peter Posada and I took her case to trial before a jury. For 2 days, we helped Leily tell her story to the jury and showed them the conditions that she'd been living with.
He was like my hero because he prepared me for court. He said everything's gonna be fine. He also gave me the opportunity to speak on behalf of myself, and so it made me feel safe.
So I remember one client that I worked with throughout the entire semester was a woman living in a basically unlivable apartment. She had roaches, mice, no heat during the winter.
It was a Friday. It was about 4 p.m. and a client came in. She had actually been sued for eviction. She had actually won her case, but her landlord had tried to evict her anyway by changing the locks and making it so that she was unable to access her apartment.
And we were able to negotiate successfully with the landlord by the end of the semester for him to fix those issues and to get heat in the apartment, and for her to stay in the apartment with some rent back as well.
So that Friday afternoon, the client came in. I helped her file an emergency motion, which was decided by the judge the same day. And we were able to get an order from the judge that required the landlord to let her back into that apartment so that she would have somewhere to sleep that night.
At least in my experience, usually landlords are represented by counsel and tenants are often not. And Rising for Justice is trying to help balance that out. They're trying to provide representation for those who need it most and for really the most marginalized and vulnerable communities.
When the jury saw the conditions in Laylee's apartment, it ruled in her favor, giving her a 90% reduction in rent, rolling back several years' worth of rent increases that her landlord had taken, and most importantly, affirming her right to stay in the only home that she'd known in this country.
I was so nervous when the judge actually gave the verdict, and they say, well, that we have won the case. I was so happy, I was so relieved because I didn't know what was gonna happen.
Rising for Justice is there every hour that the court is open. So whenever somebody comes to the courthouse in need of legal assistance with a housing problem, Rising for Justice is there.
You know, the client is trusting you to handle not only their housing situation, but their way to pay for the housing situation as well. So I didn't take that lightly.
Working in housing law is not something I had really considered for myself when I was in law school, but I came here and I just saw the need and I saw the dedication that the attorneys who work here bring to the field. And that has really inspired me to continue doing housing work and continue doing civil legal services.
Rising for Justice laid the foundation of what I hope to be a lifelong career in tenant defense, representing tenants in eviction cases.
The most important thing for my brothers and I now is that we have a roof on our head, and so grateful that David helped us through Rising for Justice.
For me, for my career, and for the clients, the difference is Rising for Justice.
For me, for my students, for our clients, the difference has been Rising for Justice.
La diferencia para mí y mis hermanos ha sido Rising for Justice.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. The stories you just heard would not have been possible without the tireless work, passion for justice, and finely honed skills of our staff and students. Our legal, social work, and administrative staff, along with our students, have continued to make our clients' lives better every day, day in and day out throughout the pandemic. Indeed, for our clients, the difference has been Rising for Justice. As we all recognize, COVID-19 has only exacerbated the problems faced by low-income DC residents. People who were previously living on the edge have been pushed into poverty. More people are unemployed, more tenants are at risk of eviction and homelessness. Job prospects are dim for those entangled in or targeted by the criminal justice system, and levels of intra-family violence are escalating. Continuing economic instability has given rise to very significant collateral problems that require the skills of attorneys and social workers. As the eviction moratorium comes to a close, we expect a tremendous demand for services in our key practice areas. Even more tenants will need skilled attorneys to help keep a roof over their heads when confronted by landlords who are typically represented by counsel. And even more DC residents will need their criminal records expunged in order to have any chance at all of finding a job. And more families will need representation for both sides in civil protection order proceedings to ensure lasting solutions to intra-family violence. The increase in the number of clients with critical legal needs will also require increased social work support, so our clients can start to rebuild their lives and have a well-deserved chance at long-lasting stability. We share these powerful stories about our work tonight because we cannot meet the demand for services without your support. The dollars raised this evening will help change lives and keep families together. On behalf of our staff, students, and the people whose lives they've helped to change, our heartfelt thanks. It's appropriate that this evening's keynote speaker is a man who has changed, indeed saved, countless lives over his decades of service. Steve Bright has had a remarkable career that embodies every value we seek to instill in our students and in our practice of law. After working as a legal services attorney in Kentucky, Steve spent part of his early career right here in the district as a trial attorney at the DC Public Defender Service. After PDS, Steve served as the director of DC Law Students in Court, now known as Rising for Justice, inspiring our staff and students to do their very best on behalf of our clients and to promote equal justice. Steve left DC for Atlanta in the early 80s to serve as the founding director of the Southern Center for Human Rights, where he worked for over 3.5 decades on capital cases on the trial and the appellate level throughout the country, including in landmark capital cases that he argued and won before the U.S. Supreme Court. Not surprisingly, Steve has received numerous awards throughout his career, including the ABA's Thurgood Marshall Award. He has taught at law schools throughout the country and currently teaches at both Georgetown Law and Yale Law School. His legal advocacy, teaching, and writing has focused on some of the most urgent and nettlesome issues of our time, including race discrimination in the criminal justice system, capital punishment, and the conditions of confinement in prisons and jails. In the most unassuming, effective, and deeply principled way, Steve has served as an inspiration to generation after generation of attorneys who want to make this world a fairer and more just place. Steve has certainly inspired me throughout my career, and I am confident he will do the same for you. It is my great pleasure to welcome Steve Bright.
Thank you, Grace. It's great to be a part of this celebration. And congratulations to tonight's honoree, Wanji Walcott, an alumni of Rising for Justice, who represented tenants in the program when she was a student at Howard University Law School and has since gone on to a distinguished career at many of the financial institutions that we've all relied upon over the years. I remember getting my Discover card in 1985 when it was offered by Sears. If you grew up like I did on a farm in Kentucky, you relied a lot on Sears growing up. And I got my Discover card because they didn't charge an annual fee. So congratulations on all the great work that you have done. I'm particularly glad to be here tonight because I had the great privilege 40 years ago of being a part of this program. At that time, it was called Law Students in Court, which you have to say was a very descriptive title, although not perhaps as inspirational as Rising for Justice. I remember going many times to landlord-tenant court and watching lawyers for the landlords asking for default judgments in just case after case after case, and getting them in all the cases except the ones in which the tenants were represented by our students. I was so proud of the work that our students did in helping people deal with eviction cases and other cases. I became a big believer in clinical education for what it could do for our clients in protecting their rights, in intervening for them in the most desperate and urgent times in their lives, for what it could do for our students in terms of giving them a great educational program, and what it could do for the future. Because when students became aware of the urgent needs that the clients had, and when they saw what a difference they could make, they responded to those needs in law school, but also when they made career choices and when they decided to take pro bono assignments when they were at law firms. I had then, as I have now, a great appreciation for the importance of the right to counsel for people in all kinds of cases, and particularly cases where the stakes are high and the deck is stacked against the poor and the powerless. I mean, what could be more unfair than litigation where one side is represented by aggressive lawyers and the other side is completely defenseless? I know something from work I've been doing, both as a legal services lawyer, as a public defender at Southern Center for Human Rights. I know something about what Hugo Black called the guiding hand of counsel. And I know that in many cases, having a lawyer or not having a lawyer is like being in a foreign land where you don't know the customs and you don't know the language. The stakes don't get any higher than a family facing eviction. And all over the country, in New York and San Francisco and many other places, it's recognized that people facing eviction must have lawyers if justice is to be done in those cases. Here in the district, many of those facing eviction are dependent upon the students, the law students and the social work students and the lawyers and social workers at Rising for Justice. And we meet tonight as the program responds to the crisis resulting from the resumption of evictions despite the ongoing pandemic. More families and individuals are at risk of eviction and homelessness. More people are unemployed, living on the edge, and are being pushed into poverty. I'm teaching right now at Georgetown Law, and I've been meeting with students who've been in Rising for Justice. And I've talked to them and gained a new appreciation for how much they mean to their clients and how much the experience of representing people means to them. One of the students told me about representing people remotely from Korea at 3 o'clock in the morning. One of the cases she had was a client who couldn't speak English and couldn't get directions on how to apply for something because it was not in Spanish. And the student was able to prevail for her and for everybody else, for that matter, to make the instructions available in Spanish as well as English. She also told me about the appreciation she had from representing people about just what a difference a lawyer could make, sometimes not because you could win the case, but because you could give the client a little more space, a little more time to deal with whatever was going on, the crisis. That instead of the client being thrown out on the street, the client was able to make arrangements with family and friends for another place to live and avoid homelessness. Another student told me about the challenges of representing a mentally challenged client, all the way up to and including a trial that went on for 3.5 weeks. She said one day the client was absolutely loved the team that was representing her. And then on other days, she was absolutely convinced that the lawyers and the people on the team were conspiring against her. It's a very challenging case for a law student, but she told me that it was a great opportunity, learning to deal with the client's issues, but also separately dealing with the legal issues in the case and not letting the distraction of some of the client issues keeping her from doing the very best she could with regard to the representation. I'm talking to students here. I've heard about other clients and other cases, representing people in protective order cases, helping sort out issues of family violence, helping people get their records expunged, which is critically important for so many people to get on with their lives, conducting Know Your Rights programs in the community, explaining the culture and the language of the legal system to people who need to know, and working with Grace in developing the facts with regard to COVID at the DC jail that led to a temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction to protect the health and safety of people in custody. In all their work, they're also the students and the lawyers, the social workers, everybody. They're reaching out to lawyers at law firms to provide pro bono representation in some of the cases, which makes it possible, of course, for the program to do even more. So when we contribute to Rising for Justice, we get a lot of bang for our buck. And more importantly, the clients I've described, the people facing evictions, the people in protection order cases, the family violence cases, the people, prisoners at the jail, they're getting a lot of representational bang for our buck. So let's continue what's been going on and what this program has been doing so well for so long. Combining the talents of students and social workers with high quality representation of clients and an extraordinary learning experience for students. And what's so great, as I said earlier, is that students are not only responding to urgent, desperate needs, they're also becoming lifelong advocates for justice. They're moving us closer to the day when everyone facing eviction or facing any other major consequence of a legal decision has the guiding hand of counsel at every step of the proceeding. So thank you, good luck, and good evening.
Wow. How about that Steve Bright, right? Seriously. He is truly one of a kind and one of the most genuine and honest people I've ever met. Now, I had the honor of meeting Steve at an event in Palm Springs, back when we used to go to events in places like Palm Springs, aka the good old days. We decided to share a ride back to the airport, and I must tell you, it was one of the best rides to the airport that I've ever had. We talked about race and people, the state of the world, what was happening on the news. And the best part is that both of our flights ended up being delayed, so I got to spend even more time with the legend that is Steve Bright. Steve Bright has Rising for Justice in his DNA, and vice versa. They are both committed to justice and for standing up what's right for people. And that's why your support for Rising for Justice is so essential. So go on and pick up your phone and text COS 2021 to 41444. Now, we've already had some really generous donations come in tonight, and I hope we'll see many more. Now it's time to recognize and celebrate our 2021 Celebration of Service honoree. To tell us more about this remarkable woman and what she's accomplished at Rising for Justice and beyond, please welcome Louise Parent.
I'm so honored to introduce Wanji Walcott, Rising for Justice's 2021 honoree. I've known Wanji for 20 years. She's a phenomenal lawyer, an inspirational leader, and an amazing person. Now the Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer of Discover Financial Services, Wanji's one of the most prominent general counsel in the United States. I met her much earlier in her career when she joined American Express. She revamped her group and was promoted many times in rapid succession. Wanji loved a challenge, and she did pioneering work at a time when technology was just beginning to revolutionize the credit card industry. But no matter what her role, Wanji worked very hard to make her team, her company, and her profession more just and equitable. Wanji's firsts is too long a list for me to recite, but it includes her co-founding the award-winning pro bono program at American Express, which focused on small businesses, her co-leading the Diversity Council and pushing for paid paternity and adoption leave at a time when other companies weren't even thinking about such an idea. She co-founded the Black Employee Network at PayPal, and this year she became the first Black woman chair of the board of the Minority Corporate Counsel Association. In accepting the role, Wanji said she wanted to turn a moment of increased awareness into a movement that would transform the profession. As a person, Wanji's always lived by the maxim, to whom much is given, much is required. She's helped countless people who've sought her out as a mentor or advisor. She's been generous with her time and wise in her counsel. Wanji simply does not turn her back on anyone, and there are countless people who will benefit from her example in law and in life. Now you know some of the reasons why I'm so proud to call Wanji my friend. Please join me in congratulating her as the Rising for Justice 2021 honoree.
Thank you, Louise, for the kind introduction. You are in many ways responsible for my success. You have been a tremendous role model, a mentor, and a sponsor, and for that I am truly grateful. I also want to thank Rising for Justice. I'm so honored and humbled to be the recipient of this year's Rising for Justice Award. This is a truly special recognition and a full circle moment for me, as I had the privilege and opportunity to work as a student lawyer with Rising for Justice when I was a third-year law student at Howard University. I still remember the day we all got sworn in as student lawyers. I was so proud. The experience definitely helped shape my career, as I was fortunate to get an early preview of what it was like not just to be a lawyer, but to be an advocate. And it was also my first foray into pro bono legal services. I probably didn't fully appreciate it at the time, as I just thought this would be a fun way to avoid having to spend most of the third year of law school in the classroom, by having the chance to get out and really help some people. It was during this experience that I realized that there are so many people who didn't have access to quality legal services. That was actually the first lesson that I learned as a student lawyer with Rising for Justice. I also learned during that experience that lawyers are actually called upon to support more than one client at a time. I remember getting my first clients, the Hendersons, a 4-generation family living in DC public housing. I poured everything into the Hendersons. I was so passionate about them having a safe and suitable place to live. I spent a lot of time getting to know them, documenting the repairs needed in their home, drafting briefs, and preparing for their case. In addition to representing the Hendersons, I also was responsible for interviewing walk-in clients every week to determine their eligibility for student lawyer representation. I remember for weeks and weeks, I never picked up another client because I just figured I have the Hendersons. I couldn't possibly take on another client. That would be too much of a distraction. Then my supervisor said to me, Wanji, it's been a couple of weeks and you haven't picked up another client. What's going on? To which I responded, I already have a client, the Hendersons. He said, no, Wanji, you have to represent more clients. There are a lot of clients who need our help, and you can effectively represent more than one client at a time. So looking back, I would say that the second lesson I learned while at Rising for Justice is that as a lawyer, I'm going to have to juggle various client demands, and that I can do that and still be an effective advocate. That was a revelation for me because I didn't really know that going in. And certainly as my career has progressed, I've been able to effectively manage numerous demands. And it's a lesson I am so glad that I learned as a student lawyer while at Rising for Justice. As I mentioned earlier, Rising for Justice was my first experience with the provision of pro bono legal services. And it was such an impactful experience that it's just been natural for me to continue this type of work throughout my career. For almost 25 years, I've been an active participant in the provision of pro bono legal services. And my commitment to this work has resulted in my having launched 2 pro bono programs for my former employers where they did not previously have in-house pro bono programs in place. I'm proud to say that both of those programs are continuing to thrive and are also award-winning, and I take great pride in knowing that I helped shape a culture and leave a legacy in each of those legal departments. Even upon my arrival at Discover Financial Services, where we also have a thriving and award-winning pro bono program that was already in place when I arrived, I actively support and participate in various pro bono activities with my amazing and committed Discover colleagues. So as I reflect on the biggest imprint Rising for Justice left on me, it's the need for everyone to have access to high-quality legal services. As a student lawyer working in landlord and tenant court, the work that I was doing and the work that my fellow law student lawyers were doing was very, very important and impacted our clients' lives because for some, it was a matter of living safely indoors versus being homeless. Housing insecurity is certainly a challenge, and making sure everyone has access to decent, acceptable, and affordable housing is critical. That's why the work performed by Rising for Justice is so important to the community. For the volunteers, it leaves you with a sense of pride, knowing that you are making a difference in someone's life. The third lesson that I learned is the need to hone practical skills. The practical skills required to be an effective advocate. The research, the analysis, the writing, the advocacy, and the overall preparation. I remember when I was appearing before DC Superior Court as a student lawyer, I had such respect for my opposing counsel, who was a DC corporation counsel. She was so experienced, and I actually learned a lot from her. She was confident, smart, poised, and in spite of my being a student lawyer, she showed me great respect and helped me out as I was new to many of the procedural nuances of standing before a judge and presenting to a court. She was a great role model, and what I learned from her is that just because someone is your adversary, it doesn't mean you can't find common ground and work together to get to the right outcome for your respective clients. With the help of the Rising for Justice staff, I learned how to improve my advocacy skills. And I learned how to navigate and be compelling before a judge, and how to defend the interests of my clients. As I reflect back on my experience with Rising for Justice, I realize how much I learned and how much it shaped me in my career, and for that I am truly grateful. I would encourage anyone working as a student lawyer for Rising for Justice to be a sponge, to learn as much as you can from the experience. Also, it's important to realize that the work that you're doing really matters. It impacts people's lives, so don't take it lightly. You're in a special and noble position to be able to have a really positive impact on people's lives. So learn as much as you can from the experience and form relationships, because that is how you get things done. And if it's too late for you to be a student lawyer, don't worry, because you can still do your part to support this outstanding program that has such a positive impact on both the volunteers and the clients it serves. Most importantly, remember that it is incumbent upon all of us to give back. I firmly believe that to whom much is given, much is required. So I encourage everyone to give back in some way. Rising for Justice taught me so much and allowed me, at a young age, to give back. And I am forever grateful for the opportunity. And also for this award. Thank you, Rising for Justice, for all that you've done to support the community and for this award. Thank you.
Congratulations on such a well-deserved honor, Wanji. Your experience at Rising for Justice and the skills that you honed in the program have enabled you to go on to such great heights while still staying true to your personal desire to give back. I know that you're an inspiration to tons of Rising for Justice alums and students, so thank you. And all of you out there should feel free to send Wanji some love in the chat, as I know she would love to hear from you. Now we are nearing the end of our time together. I told you that it would be brief, but powerful. I also told you that by the end, you have no doubt in your mind that the world is a better place with Rising for Justice in it. Or there's no doubt in my mind that for countless people every day, the difference is Rising for Justice. And the organization's courageous and dedicated professionals can't do their life-changing work without your support. So keep those donations coming in. The info's on the screen. And keep sending your thoughts and good wishes in the chat. I truly hope that next year we can gather in a big room, enjoy some big conversation and some big cocktails, and celebrate the service of Rising for Justice in person. But in the meantime, I know that no matter what happens in our world, from pandemics to legislation changes to economic downturns, Rising for Justice will be there. They've been there for so many, for more than 50 years, and we are forever grateful. On behalf of everyone at Rising for Justice and the people that we all serve, thank you for joining us, and good night.